Thank you, David, and hello everyone. So we've got the daunting task of kicking things off and warming you all up. I won't do too much of the LEK advert, but we're both partners in our consumer and retail practice. And our perspective overall is on growth. So how do businesses grow, whether it be organically or through acquisition? So that'll be the theme we'll kind of talk about for the next half hour or so. And what we were asked to talk about was how do you deal with omnichannel in a disruptive world? First disruption being the clicker's not working. Oh, double agenda, right. There's a lot going on at the moment. And we kind of tried to summarize a few key themes here. But I think those pre-millennials amongst you might remember, I think it was Gordon Brown who said the 10-year cycle had been abolished. Well, he was wrong. It feels like kind of a 1 or 2 year cycle at the moment. And you can kind of pick a theme that might be impacting your business. I know the theme today is kind of consumer and retail, but there's a lot impacting service businesses as well. It could be, how do you think about customers and getting them to trust business with more data? Could be consumer pressure in the middle. It could also be kind of government action leading to rising cost pressure. Over to the right, changing technology. I'm sure that many of us will be talking about AI this morning. But we've tried to put it into 3 main themes, which we'll talk about. So how are consumer preferences changing? How do they want to shop? And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with rising cost pressures? We'll actually talk probably a bit less about that this morning, but changing technology has a role to play in that as well. And finally, how can technology help grow your business and redefine your business? And many of these themes are being driven by the consumer. For many years, we've been worrying about millennials, who probably were the first digital natives and kind of were driving a lot of strategies. I think what we find amongst our clients is they've just about got to grips with millennials and how to interact with millennials. And then Gen Z come along. I think I've only spotted one Gen Z so far in the audience. I don't know where he's gone, but perhaps he can give us his perspectives later. But Gen Z have very different perspectives. They're highly digital. They expect seamless experiences, and indeed are, along with millennials, more experience-driven. And they were brought up in omnichannel. I think there's a terrible word going around now. We've moved from multi-channel to omnichannel. I think it's unichannel now is the key word. But perhaps more importantly, it's not good enough to put up the latest pop star, film star, rock star and try and sell something. They value community. They want to trust the people that are communicating with them, and hence the rise of the influencers. We'll come back as well as to the point of visual communication, because that's important. They are a lot more visual than text or data-driven, and that's an important point to take forward. And you can see that in these kind of brand surveys, and I think you can pick up any brand survey. They probably have a different list of top 5 brands, but the theme is the same. There's been a move away from product brands amongst the millennials to digital brands, clear digital brands being the preference of Gen Z. And amongst that, the streaming brands as well. I must admit, I'm not quite sure why M&M's got onto the list, but perhaps somebody later will have a perspective on that. But with all the issues going on, we just want to try and boil it down into perhaps four things you might want to take away and think about. There's a bit of a generalization, but otherwise we would have been here for the 4 hours, not just half an hour. So things that you can think about now and really enact in the short term. So loyalty and personalization. So how can that give you an edge over your competitors? How do you think about on-the-channel optimization? For those retailers with both stores and online, how do you think about the interaction between the two? What's the future of the store network? But also for brands as well, whether you're selling through third-party retailers or direct-to-consumer, how do you think about optimizing your approach? And then we'll touch a bit on the longer term as well. some themes around AI and what you need to start thinking about now and enacting now to benefit from AI, and how it all links together in terms of bringing your data ecosystems together. So I'm going to pause for a moment and hand over to Jan on the first couple of themes.
Thank you, Jonathan. So starting with loyalty and personalization, I think one of the most important things to understand about loyalty is loyalty doesn't really end with, I've got a customer to have a repeat purchase. That's sort of the beginning of the journey, right? Loyalty means a lot more than that. There is a clear sort of continuum. You might get someone to come back and buy something, but they might still feel quite ambivalent about you. And you sort of want to gradually move them along the journey to the end state, what we define as emotional loyalty, where they're really quite emotionally invested in your business or your brand. And we have a few examples on this page. I think people would recognize they might not be themselves necessarily passionate about any one of them, but they probably have at least one person in their circle of friends that is quite passionate about at least one of those logos. I certainly remember discussions with people who were very, very passionate about their iPhones back in the day and couldn't understand how you could have anything else. So there are brands and retailers who clearly achieve that sort of level of loyalty, engagement, where people feel really passionate about it and they're advocates, and it's no longer a transactional relationship. And that is sort of the ultimate aim of where you want to get to with your loyalty strategy. It is also important to understand no one, not even Apple, not even Disney, gets there with all of their customers, right? You can only ever achieve that with a subset of them, and like sort of understanding where do you have a chance to really move them along and where do you need to settle for. It is always going to be a slightly more transactional relationship is really important. And when we come towards how do you actually build this sort of loyalty, generally, the answer that we have found works best tends to be about personalization, where customers really feel like, okay, this brand or this retailer gets me. They feel understood. They feel like the communication they receive is relevant to them. The offers they receive feel like well thought out. There is obviously all sorts of hygiene factors about a good general customer experience, but the more they feel like, okay, they get me as a person and they're relating with me one-to-one rather than as sort of a group of faceless customers, that is really something that can help drive loyalty. And we had significant conversations with a number of clients on this and helped them along this journey. But one example that I come across and find really interesting is NARS. You might know better some of their brands like Bioderma, sort of a leading skincare brand. And they historically tended to have a B2C model. So they really sold via dermatologists, and it was really important for them to sort of have an expert in the room and sort of make sure that customers got really good recommendations, and there was sort of like a connection and people felt well taken care of and got the right product for their skincare needs. So they wanted to move more towards a B2C direction and said, well, how can we try to replicate this sort of relationship without that intermediary who sees the person, who has that intimate relationship? How can we do that without that at scale? And thankfully, AI to the rescue, as we so often hear. But one of the ways they have done this is with an app that sort of can scan your face, analyze your profile, and then they do quite a lot of work around personalizing their offering, giving you detailed recommendations. You can sort of log effects of your experiences, and they sort of keep refining that and make this into a very, very personalized experience that is trying to resemble the sort of engagement you would have had with a dermatologist potentially. And I think the results that they have seen have been pretty impressive in terms of customer engagement and success. There are others like some of our favorite grocers who have gone slightly different routes. There it is more around sort of personalization of offers and discounts around the loyalty program with Sainsbury's around Nectar, right? Everyone gets a sort of a different Nectar discount that is not always perfect, but generally sort of matches what's in your shopping basket. Tesco has gone even a little bit further with their club card challenges, which sort of give you certain items they want you to challenge yourself to buy more. For example, might be a shift towards a healthier lifestyle. It's sort of nicely combined, nudging customers in a direction you might want to nudge them, with at the same time showcasing that you sort of understand them quite well and you personalize your offering to them. So that's sort of on the loyalty front. Then the next big topic, obviously, omnichannel and then network optimization. Starting for a moment on the store side of things, obviously digital is super important, but there are a lot of things how that is impacting your store estate. And what we have found, what people really need to ask them around the store estate, well, the first one's obvious, where should my stores be located? The second one's also, what customer type will use each store? But there's a sort of question behind that that's maybe less obvious. How will each of my customers use my store? Because there is a significant difference, even within the same customer, what they're actually looking for when they come to your store for different missions, right? If I am going out and I'm going to the Sainsbury's or Tesco in Liverpool Station to get lunch, I'm looking for quite a different experience than I am on the weekend and I'm trying to host a party and I need to buy some things for that, right? There is different product offering, different amount of dwell time I want to have in the store, all these sorts of differences. And to meet the customer mission, I need to make sure that my format, my layout, all of that is optimized to really fit with what customers are looking for. And generally, you then need to obviously think through, okay, this is within my store estate. How does that relate with my online offer, right? Consistency around pricing, promotions, merchandising, what's the role of returns? From a mission perspective, there might also be things like, for example, if you're an electronic retailer, is my store actually a place where people want to transact in cases of some customers? Or is this more of something where they get the touch and feel experience and then they might actually want the online order and delivery, right? So there is a lot of interplay, obviously, between your two channels. And that just gets us on to the next part. And I'm sure you've all seen different versions of this. But as you sort of go along the customer purchase journey, customers, and particularly younger customers, are regularly switching back and forth between online, in-store touch points. We've sort of kept it to touch points where the retailer has a certain amount of control over. There are obviously then social media, social commerce, marketplace to be added on top of that. But it starts all the way from purchase inspiration, where not even that, right, might be a single touch point. It might be I read a review site or a blog. I then went into the store to browse. I got new sources of inspiration. I did my product research across the store and online. And then you really need to make sure that you find a way to seamlessly convert that into purchase. The worst thing that can happen to you is you're Waterstones and everyone walks through your wonderful bookstore. And they got a lot better at this, by the way, but has great inspirations of all the books they want to try. They write it down, and when they have a bit more time, they go on Amazon, check out the star reviews, and buy 3 out of 5. And Waterstones saw not a penny of the sale they helped to create, right? So the expectation on this is rising. The ability to integrate across all these different touch points is increasingly important, and that sort of leads you to the data question of it all, because I think where most retailers that we encounter still struggle is getting all the different data touch points together to really find the one customer view that you can take through this. And that's obviously the next step that a lot of people need to take. And there are sort of in-between shortcuts you can use, be it mission analysis, be it some customer segmentation, that can help you on that journey.
Great, thank you. So AI, I'm sure you'll understand, I can't give you all the answers on AI, it's kind of changing so rapidly. But what we thought we'd do is kind of talk about a few things that we're seeing that are really shaping our clients' thinking about how they approach the consumer touch points in the future. The first is kind of zero-click search. I'm sure you've all seen, you do a Google search, even before you get the sponsored adverts, you now get a summary at the top of the search. This is quite fundamental. Some surveys have shown that when consumers see that summary, probably about half of them don't read that further down the page and don't click through. And just over half of them end their search there. They're just relying on the summary. So that's changing the world from search engine optimization, where everyone has spent millions optimizing words and search terms, to thinking about how do I get into the AI summary as the real estate for really influencing consumer choice. And that's going to fundamentally change online interactions. Somewhat related to that is photo and image discovery. So people searching more and more using images rather than using text. Now, still pretty early days. If you try Google Lens, you'll know what some of the results are. But this very much ties into what I was saying earlier about Gen Z being kind of more visual than text driven. So what retailers and brands need to think about is not only optimizing data, either on the website or in the catalog, but optimizing images. So how do you optimize the images so they get traction on the search? Conversational interfaces are, again, still early days. Some of you might have tried Amazon Rufus. They're over in the US. There's Walmart Sparky. What this is doing is kind of being a bit more intuitive and a bit more conversational around your searches. It relies on the engines being trained on the catalog of the retailer, but also understanding the consumer choices that person has had in the past. There's some view that these could become the personal shopping assistants of the future, not only tied to specific retailers, but trawling across a range of retailers as well. Again, a real change in how retailers and brands will interact with their consumers. And the last one is product matching. I mean, we've shown kind of fashion matching here. It could also take scans of your home and recommend furniture or homewares. Again, very nascent. And where we see the benefits of this is beyond a single product sale. But if consumers get more assurance around the fact that a piece of clothing will fit or a sofa will look good in the living room, then that's likely to significantly increase conversion rates. And again, that and reduce returns. And that could transform e-commerce economics. There's also a view that this could further assist bundling of products as well. So again, recommendations around, we bought the sofa, what footstool do you go with it? And more customer reassurance that that is going to work in your home. So trends that are really going to, we think, transform the consumer interface. There are other aspects as well, some of which we've already touched on. The Holy Grail has always been personalization. Now, this is very difficult in a retail context because you can't run every store or every category trying to communicate with one retailer. Easier online if you have the data and the engines that can tell you what the consumer really prefers and how to communicate offers to that person. Now, again, Amazon has been doing it a long time with their selections. This is only going to get better and better. Linked to that is offers and pricing. I mean, we've touched on how Sainsbury's and Nectar are doing that at the moment. That will continue to evolve. And over on the right-hand side, lead to individualized communications as well. There are quite important supply chain issues here as well. What a lot of retailers struggle with is real-time inventory management. So that's not only knowing what is in stock, either in store or online, but how much stock to have in store or online. And with kind of advanced predictive analytics, not only thinking about how demand might vary, but how more individual demand might vary will again transform how retailers and brands think about their inventory management. So I think all we hope to achieve this morning is kind of give some pointers as to what's happening and what you might want to continue to think about. There's one final point on this far too overcomplicated slide for 9:30 on a Thursday morning. And I don't want to talk about tech stacks. That's definitely not our area. But what I do want to talk about is how you link data and your kind of data and data analytics together. Because everything that we've talked about requires data. Loyalty and personalization requires data. Mission analysis, whether it be in store or online, requires data, as does a lot of the AI engines that we've been talking about. And one big challenge with that is the move to more and more first-party data, and how do you encourage first-party data, which really means the consumer's giving you their data directly rather than relying on cookies to infer behavioral habits. And the various thoughts as to how that might happen. So if you can demonstrate up at the top to your consumers that you're using their data for their benefit, either to give them better pricing, to give them better products, to give them better referrals, that is likely to encourage them more to provide you the data you want. Now, there's a question of where you kickstart that, but that's a critical issue to think about. We've talked about recommendation and AI agents, but the one at the bottom I'd like to perhaps finish on is how do you create community? And this comes back to what Jan was talking about loyalty and emotional relationships. You need to start thinking about how you're going to build that emotional loyalty. The start may be now through the loyalty schemes, because it's through emotional loyalty that consumers will be willing to give you the data that will underpin your data systems. So we've touched on quite a few themes in half an hour, rapid run through. I'll leave you with one thought. There is one school of thought in retail that the world will bifurcate. We'll have a group of global scale businesses that leverage their scale in procurement, logistics, technology to drive customer proposition through efficiency. You can think about Amazon as potentially being one of those players. It's interesting to see the moves of JD.com. You might have seen them acquiring Seconomy in Europe, trying to acquire Argos in the UK. But what they're trying to do is drive global touch points and global scale. What does that leave for everyone else? Because there are going to be very few of those players. Well, you have to be niche. You have to understand your consumer and understand the offers that you're going to provide to them. You need to be flexible and nimble. And you need to build that, I'm going to use the word again, you need to build that relationship with your consumers to survive as a smaller retailer or as a smaller brand in the world as we see it going forward. So thank you. I think just about on time.